We are back on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180. The best view of big government is in the rear view mirror as you're driving from it. That was Ronald Reagan about 30 years ago.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan was an interesting guy. You know, one of the things, Matthew, we talked about is change, or Obama talked about change. Obama talks about change, and Romney is living change, as you've been expressing. He's gone from the sort of liberal side to the more conservative side. So can you describe some of the things that have shown where Romney has made changes?
Yeah, you look at Romney even from 2008 and how he campaigned, and it didn't seem like, first of all, I don't think any of the candidates completely understand economics other than Ron Paul. But at least Romney's touting tax cuts, and his recent rhetoric, recent being the past 5 months, in terms of economics, has been extremely strong if you're an advocate of free markets. Because what he's been basically saying is, in his attacks on Obama, they're very principle driven, and that was something that Reagan was very good at. Romney seems to be hitting at the core. Like, he's not running around the peripheral issues of, oh, this tax or that tax. He's hitting Obama, saying Obama is against free markets, and kind of taking the argument back to the idea of the philosophy that undermines it. And I think that's going to be, if he sticks to that going forward, I think he'll have an easy time in the election.
You know, when you were talking, going back to the book for a moment, I think clearly the answer would be Reagan. But do you think Obama would lose to Reagan if Reagan were running against him in 2012?
Yeah, if you remember 1980, I think it'd be very similar. And Carter was beating Reagan most of the campaign, and even a few days before, they had this debate. It was 8 days before the election. It was the only debate of the campaign. It was held in Cleveland, and Reagan on one side and Carter on the other side, and it was a great debate, and they both really expressed different philosophies. Carter continued on with an Obama-esque dialogue of the need for big government, and Reagan pushed rugged individualism. And after the debate, you can go back and you can see the pontificators. Almost all of them were like, "Well, this was a pretty close debate. It looks like President Carter won by a little bit the debate." But then the voters decided, and the voters overwhelmingly chose Reagan. And I think in my lifetime, I've never had two competing candidates with different philosophies than Reagan and Carter, except for maybe Romney and President Obama. And to have them have the debate in front of the American people, away from the newspapers, away from the mainstream media, just seeing the two of them on the stage expressing their different philosophies, I think it'll be a runaway election.
You know, I think in order for that to happen, though, I think Romney has to distinguish himself much more from Obama than he has, because you're right, when Reagan ran against Carter, the distinction was really there. You could tell the difference. And the other thing that Reagan did not have going for him, and a friend of mine reminded me of this the other day, he reminded me that I told him in 1979, I said, as much as I like Ronald Reagan, I don't think Ronald Reagan could ever be elected because he didn't have the backing of the Republican establishment, and the media was so against Reagan at that time. But yet he pulled it off, and Romney doesn't have the support of a lot of the conservatives and a lot of the establishment.
That's a great point. And you remember 1976, Reagan, they hated Reagan. He ran against the sitting president. The whole establishment was against him. And he still came so close to pulling that off. And Romney, who people are calling the mainstream Republican candidate, I don't see that. I see him being undermined by the establishment at every step. And there's a lot of parallels there as well. But Romney doesn't have the support of the Republican Party. They're just now starting to have joint fundraising, supposedly. But I agree. There's a lot of similarities there.
Well, if you happen to have watched the speech that Romney gave this past Tuesday night after the election in Wisconsin, he really went after Obama and was distinguishing himself from Obama. It was a great talk, and I was really impressed.
I did see that, and I agree. He's finding his footing. It's just kind of, I think at this point it's an authenticity test with the American, conservative. I think if he can just convince us that he's sincere the way Reagan did, that he's not going to get into office and have no teacher left behind, no child left behind, and create new entitlement programs. Because let's face it, conservatives are a little road weary right now. You know, we've seen these candidates all talk a good game, and then a lot of times they get into office and something different happens. So the bar for convincing at least my conservative peers is been raised over the past few years.
Our guest by phone, Matthew Lysiak, author of The Choice, Ronald Reagan versus Barack Obama and the election of 2012.
You know, one of the problems that Romney seems to have is his wealth, and Obama keeps keying in on that. As an example, he was in California for a few days this past month, or earlier this month maybe, looking at the house he's building. It's a $19 million home, and he's got a garage where you drive the car in, and there's an elevator that takes the car upstairs. I don't know if you heard anything about that, but that's discouraging a lot of people.
What has happened to our country
Exactly.
when becoming wealthy is a campaign tool to be used against you? I mean, how is this I fail to understand it, and I know how it's used in modern conventions to show that somebody's out of touch, but wasn't there a time in this country when being successful was applauded?
Yeah.
And wealth was a sign of success? I mean, would it be better if Romney had failed at every business venture and lived in a grass hut? Would he all of a sudden be more qualified to be president?
I like
Well,
that.
if you have a socialist Marxist president, then you can understand why they're bringing this up. They would.
It is, and it just shows how crazy things are. That how different. What a philosophical core President Obama has, or any of these candidates have, who are going to attack a candidate for their success.
Yeah, exactly. And Romney has been very successful. Now, where Obama is probably the least knowledgeable person when he enters a business room.
Well,
I mean, would you let that guy run your kid's lemonade stand? Could you imagine? But, you know, Romney's not doing himself any favors. He acts ashamed by his success. He's trying to drive around in a pickup truck half the time. You know, I understand what he's doing, but I have a lot of faith in the American voter. Don't think they're stupid. They're not.
The problem with the American voter today is only about 25 to 35% pay any attention to actually what's going on, and the balance just votes because he's pretty or he talks good.
Another problem: only 50% of the voters actually pay taxes.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly. Yeah, that's a big problem. As we've talked in the past on this show, that pendulum is starting to shift to where it won't be that long before it'll be over 50% not paying taxes.
I can't understand, Matthew, why the Jewish community supports Obama after everything he's done to them.
That's a great question, and I know the polling shows that they're still supporting. But I think actually, it's funny you mention that, because in my book, I have him dumping Biden. I have Obama dumping Biden and picking up Wasserman Schultz.
Oh,
you know,
God.
just trying to secure the Jewish vote in the I-95 corridor. But I think it's going to be different when Jewish voters actually have to go into their polling place, knowing what their options are. I think the polls are really going to reflect strongly how they actually are going to vote.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's funny. I think when they go in the polls, go in to make the vote, I think it's going to be totally different. Now, you're segueing into one of the questions I had for you, which is, who would Ronald Reagan's running mate be if he were running?
No, see, this is a very sad thing for me. Reagan had this option in 1980, and he chose a very moderate person, as people know. He chose, and he altered the history of mankind. He chose George Bush Sr. I think he would choose Romney.
Really?
I do, yeah.
Wow.
Remember he chose Bush after Bush made fun of his economics. He referred to it as voodoo economics.
Yep.
But Romney, I think, would run a more moderate campaign. Back to his, authenticity. I think his campaign would run to the left of Reagan if Reagan was in this race, and Reagan would pick Romney.
That's actually thinking about that, because I haven't had a chance to read your book. I'm finishing another book before I pick up yours, but that's actually a great combination if you think about it. Reagan Romney, that would be a winning combination. I'd vote for that. Not that I wouldn't vote for anybody that was with Reagan, but
yeah, listen, I would vote for Ted Kennedy's corpse against President Obama right now.
Yeah, I've always said an empty beer can would be better.
Yeah, right. I mean, so whoever the GOP nominee is, and it's going to be Romney.
Well, here's a couple of VP candidates for him. Colonel West would be a great choice, and as would Condoleezza Rice.
Oh, but yeah, you know Condoleezza Rice. There's no way she's going to do it. She's got the best job in the world. I've heard her a couple times in person answer that question, and it's like you see the smile across her face, like, she's literally saying, why do I need to do it? I've got more influence now than I would have if I ran for office. I mean, she's in a perfect spot.
Obama ought to bring in Thunder Thighs.
Do you remember when Condoleezza Rice was before the House Judiciary Committee and had to, or one of those committees, and was having to answer questions?
Yes.
You could see her. I think she has a temper. You could see her raging underneath. Like, she really I don't think she has necessarily the disposition for a campaign, nor would she want to.
No.
I'm really hoping he picks Rubio, and I know that's what everybody's thinking he might do. But I think Rubio would really be a great pick, not only because it's Florida, but I think Hispanics are a natural constituency for the Republican Party, if we can just convey to them what our message is.
I think so. I think it's a great book. Okay, the book again is The Choice, Ronald Reagan versus Barack Obama and the election of 2012. Matthew, we have to have you back. There's some other issues I want to talk to you about when we get another chance.
Anytime. Thanks a lot, everybody.
We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Current Radio, News Talk, 1180.